Jonathan Pierce took the long way home through the industrial district. His late meeting at the rail yards had run past sunset, and the unfamiliar streets stretched darker than he expected. Gas lamps flickered against brick warehouses, most abandoned since the Panic of '93. Through broken windows of one building, lamplight glowed warm against the darkness. Children's voices drifted out, reciting letters in unison. Jonathan slowed his carriage, curiosity pulling him towards something he couldn't name. He tied the horses and stepped through the sagging doorway. Inside, a dozen children sat on wooden crates arranged in careful rows. Their clothes were patched and worn, feet mostly bare despite the autumn chill. But their faces shone with concentration as they hunched over salvaged slates, copying letters from a battered primer. A young woman moved between them with quiet authority. Her dress was simple but clean, her dark hair pinned back practically. She knelt beside a small boy, guiding his hand across the slate. "There, Charlie," she said. "Now write your whole name." The boy's tongue pressed between his lips as he worked. When he finished, he looked up with wonder blooming across his face. "I did it. Miss Katie. That's me. That's my name." "Yes," she said, her voice carrying fierce pride. "That's you. No one can take that away now." Jonathan stood in the shadows, transfixed. The lamplight caught tears streaming down the boy's cheeks, tears of joy at claiming his own identity in written form. The other children applauded, understanding the victory. Katie noticed him then. She rose smoothly, placing herself between Jonathan and her pupils. "Can I help you?" Her tone was polite but wary. "Have you come to help or to judge?" Jonathan removed his hat. "I was passing by. I heard the children." "We're not breaking any laws." Katie said, "The warehouse is abandoned. The children need somewhere warm to learn." "I wasn't suggesting." Jonathan paused, searching for words. "What you're doing here is remarkable." Katie's expression softened slightly. "These children deserve the same chance others get. Someone showed me mercy once. I'm paying it forward." One of the older girls raised her hand. "Miss Katie, should I help May with her letters?" "Yes, Sarah." "Thank you." Jonathan watched them work together, the older teaching the younger with Katie's same gentle patience. The warehouse held no desks, no proper supplies, no heat beyond what the lamp provided. Yet something sacred lived here. "I should go," he said quietly. "Thank you for letting me observe." Katie nodded. "We meet 3 evenings a week. You're welcome to return. If you come with open hands and an open heart." Jonathan drove home slowly, unable to shake what he'd witnessed. His own house rose before him, 3 stories of brick and imported windows. Inside, his sons Theodore and William sat in their schoolroom while their governess drilled Latin declensions. Amo, amas, amat. They recited in mechanical unison. Miss Fletcher rapped her ruler on the desk. Again. With feeling, Jonathan stood in the doorway, watching. The boys' faces held no joy, no wonder, no triumph. Just bored compliance with another evening's requirements. He thought of the barefoot boy writing his name, claiming himself on that salvaged slate. He thought of Katie's question help or judge and realized he'd spent years doing neither. That night, sleep eluded him. He kept seeing lamplight through broken windows, kept hearing a child's voice declaring victory in 4 letters CHARLIE. Jonathan returned to the warehouse 3 days later, this time with purpose. He'd spent those days making inquiries, learning Katie's story. Orphaned at 7, educated by charity at a mission school. Now 23, and giving back what she'd received. She looked up from her teaching as he entered. "Mr. Pierce, I didn't expect to see you again. May I speak with you after your lesson?" Katie glanced at her students. "We finish at 8 o'clock. Jonathan waited outside, listening to the rhythm of learning through the walls. When the children filed out, they nodded politely to him, eyes curious but unafraid. Katie emerged last, carrying her worn primer and the lamp. "What can I do for you, Mr. Pierce?" "I have a proposition." Jonathan gestured toward a relatively clean section of wall. "May we sit?" They settled on empty crates. Katie set the lamp between them, its light casting shadows that danced like questions. "My sons attend the finest academy in the city," Jonathan began. "They study Latin, French, advanced mathematics. They have every advantage money can buy." "Then they're very fortunate." "Are they?" Jonathan leaned forward. "I've watched you teach. You give these children something my money can't purchase: passion, purpose, the sense that education matters." Katie's eyes narrowed. "What are you asking?" "Come teach my sons. I'll pay you triple what any teacher in this city earns. You'll have proper supplies, a real schoolroom, everything you need." The silence stretched long. Katie looked at the lamp, then back at him. "No." Jonathan blinked. "I haven't told you the salary amount." "It doesn't matter." Katie stood, picking up the lamp. "These children depend on me. They have no other chance. No other teacher willing to see them as worthy of education. Your sons have every advantage already, but you could do more good with proper resources." "Could I?" Katie's voice remained gentle but firm. "Your children learn to read Latin. Mine learn to read the world. Which do you think matters more when a man stands before his maker?" The question hit Jonathan like a physical blow. He stood slowly, hat in hand. "I meant no offense." "I know." Katie's expression softened. "You meant well, but meaning well and doing well aren't always the same thing. Good night, Mr. Pierce." She walked into the darkness, lamplight bobbing away like a retreating star. Jonathan drove home through empty streets. Katie's question echoed in the carriage's silence, settling into his chest like a stone. Latin or the world? Which matters more? He found Theodore struggling through Caesar's Gallic wars while William conjugated, verbs he'd never use in actual conversation. Both boys looked miserable, going through motions without understanding why. Katie's street children fought for every hour of learning. His sons endured education like a prison sentence. The stone in his chest grew heavier. That night, he couldn't escape the question. It followed him into sleep and waited when he woke. Which matters more before your maker? He had no answer that satisfied. Jonathan returned to the warehouse 5 days later, arriving as Katie finished her lesson. She looked unsurprised to see him. "Mr. Pierce, have you come to help or to judge?" "Neither." He took a breath. "I've come to negotiate." Katie dismissed her students with gentle instructions for practice. When they were alone, she turned to him with patient expectation. "I want to propose something different," Jonathan said. "I'll build you a proper schoolhouse. Not here on my estate grounds. New desks, books, slates, everything you need. I'll fund it completely." Katie's expression remained neutral. "In exchange for what?" "My sons attend your school. They learn alongside your students." The silence stretched taut. Katie studied him carefully, searching for trap or trick. "Your friends won't approve," she said finally. "Your sons sitting beside street urchin society will crucify you." "Then perhaps I need better friends?" The words surprised Jonathan as much as Katie. He hadn't planned to say them, but once spoken, they felt true. Katie paced the warehouse, lamplight following her movement. "Why does this matter to you?" "Because I've built an empire," Jonathan said quietly. "Rail lines, investments, properties across 3 states. And I just realized none of it means anything if my sons grow up hollow. You showed me that. I showed you nothing. I just teach children to read. You teach them that they matter. That education is theirs by right, not by privilege." Jonathan stood. "My sons need to learn that lesson more than Latin declensions." Katie stopped pacing. "If I agree, I have conditions. Name them. Full integration. No separate classes. No hierarchy. Your sons sit beside mine as equals. If they can't handle that, they're not ready to inherit anything worth having. Jonathan felt his hand tremble slightly. She was asking him to shock his entire social circle, to expose his children to judgment and scorn, but watching her fierce dignity, he felt something long dormant stirring in his chest. Agreed. They shook hands. Katie's grip was firm, her palm calloused from work. I'll have my lawyers draft papers giving you full authority over the school. Jonathan said, Construction can begin immediately. Wait. Katie held his hand a moment longer. Why are you really doing this? Jonathan looked at the warehouse, this abandoned space she'd reclaimed with nothing but love and lamplight. Because my empire suddenly feels very hollow, he said. And I'd like to build something that isn't... Katie released his hand. A small smile touched her lips. Then build well. Mr. Pierce, build something that lasts. That night, Jonathan set his construction crews to work. They cleared ground on the eastern edge of his estate, visible from the main house but separate enough for independence. He stood at his study window watching them begin, feeling simultaneously exhilarated and terrified. He'd just committed to shocking society, risking his sons' futures, defying every expectation of his class. The lamplight in the warehouse flickered in his memory. He'd build something that mattered, or fail trying. The new schoolhouse stood bright against October's golden light. Fresh white paint gleamed on clapboard walls. Windows without cracks caught morning sun. Inside, real desks lined in rows, new books stacked on shelves, slates and chalk waiting for eager hands. Katie arrived before dawn, arranging everything with careful precision. She'd brought her street children early, wanting them comfortable before Jonathan's sons appeared. Charlie the chimney sweep stood frozen in the doorway. Miss Katie, this is ours. This is ours, she confirmed. May touched a desk with reverent fingers. I never sat in a real desk before. Then sit now. Find your place. The children settled slowly, afraid to damage something so fine. Katie moved between them, easing fears with gentle touch and quiet words. At 8 o'clock, Theodore and William Pierce arrived with their father. Both boys dragged their feet, faces reflecting pure mortification. Their former academy classmates knew about this humiliation. Word had spread fast. Good morning, Katie said, addressing all students equally. Welcome to our school. We have one rule here: everyone learns together. No one is better or less than anyone else. She assigned seats with deliberate care. Theodore beside May, William beside Charlie. The boys slumped low, trying to disappear. We'll begin with arithmetic, Katie announced. Practical mathematics you'll use every day. She wrote a problem on the board. If you have 50 cents and need to buy bread for 12 cents, bacon for 23 cents, and coffee for 8 cents, how much change remains? Theodore struggled with the addition. His academy had taught theoretical mathematics, numbers divorced from meaning. May's hand shot up. 7 cents. Miss Katie. Correct. How did you calculate so quickly? I work at market. I make change all day. Theodore stared at the girl beside him. This flower seller in a patched dress who'd solved in seconds what he couldn't manage in minutes. The morning continued in similar fashion. William stumbled through reading aloud while Charlie read fluently, his chimney sweep work having taught him to decipher safety notices and job postings. The street children attacked every lesson with fierce hunger. They asked questions, volunteered answers, leaned forward with complete attention. Jonathan's sons had never wanted anything in their lives. These children wanted everything. Jonathan watched from the doorway, seeing his sons truly challenged for the first time. At noon, students ate lunch together. Theodore unwrapped food from home, thick sandwiches, fruit, cake. May had bread and cheese wrapped in cloth. The other children had similar simple fare. Some had less. Theodore ate mechanically, not noticing. May watched him waste half the cake, throwing it aside uneaten. That evening, Theodore exploded at dinner. Father, this is humiliating. My friends are laughing at me. I'm sitting beside street urchins who smell like smoke and flowers. Jonathan set down his fork slowly. What did you learn today? Nothing useful. That girl May knows market arithmetic. What good is that? More good than you realize, Jonathan said quietly. Did she solve the problems faster than you? Theodore's face reddened. That's not the point. Then what is the point, son? The point is, I shouldn't have to learn beside people like that. The words hung in the air like poison. Jonathan thought of Katie's question, which matters more before your maker? He thought of Charlie writing, his name with tears of joy. You'll continue attending, Jonathan said firmly, and you'll treat your classmates with respect. Is that understood? Theodore threw his napkin down and stormed from the room. Jonathan sat alone, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. 3 weeks passed. Autumn deepened into winter's approach. Resistance grudgingly softened into routine. Theodore still hated the situation, but he'd stopped complaining at dinner. Something was shifting, though Jonathan couldn't quite name it. One afternoon, he visited during botany lessons. Katie had taken the students outside to study medicinal plants around the estate grounds. This is yarrow, May explained to Theodore, kneeling beside a patch of fern-like leaves. You crush it on cuts to stop bleeding. And this, she moved to another plant, is comfrey. Good for bruises and sprains. Theodore listened with reluctant attention. How do you know all this? My mother taught me before she died. When you're poor, you can't afford doctors. You learn to heal yourself. She continued pointing out plants, Doc, for burns, chamomile for stomach troubles, willow bark for pain. Theodore pulled out a small notebook and began writing everything down. Katie watched from a distance, catching Jonathan's eye. They shared a look of cautious hope. Inside, William and Charlie worked on a joint reading assignment. Charlie described his work climbing chimneys, the narrow darkness, the constant fear of getting stuck, the courage required to keep climbing when every instinct screamed to retreat. I never thought of it as brave, William admitted. I just thought it was dirty work. It is dirty, Charlie said simply, but it's also scary, and someone has to do it. Takes courage to face fear every day. William looked at his classmate differently after that. The chimney sweep who'd seemed beneath him suddenly seemed brave beyond anything William had experienced. Katie structured lessons around cooperation now, group projects, shared readings, problems solved together. She assigned Theodore to help younger children with writing while May tutored him in practical mathematics. The boys began arriving early, staying late. Small gestures replaced contempt, Theodore bringing extra lunch without comment. William defending Charlie from their former academy friend's mockery. The real transformation came during a cold snap in November. One of the youngest students, a girl named Rose, arrived shivering in a dress too thin for the weather. She tried to hide it, but her blue lips betrayed her. Theodore watched her struggle through morning lessons, teeth chattering despite the stove. At lunch, he disappeared briefly. He returned with one of his own wool coats. Here. You're too cold. Rose stared at the fine coat, far nicer than anything she'd ever touched. I can't. Yes, you can. I have others. Theodore draped it over her shoulders. It's just a coat. But it wasn't just a coat. Everyone in the room understood that. Katie turned away, hiding tears. That evening, Jonathan found her lingering after students left. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For trusting me with your sons. For believing this could work. They stood in the empty schoolhouse, lamplight casting long shadows. Jonathan realized these evening conversations had become the part of his day he most anticipated. You were right, he said. They needed to learn to see people, not positions. They're learning. It takes time. Katie. Jonathan hesitated. I wonder if we might discuss curriculum plans over dinner sometime. At the house. She met his eyes steadily. Dinner. Yes, professional consultation. About the school. A small smile touched her lips. Of course. Professional consultation. They both knew it wasn't entirely professional, but neither acknowledged what was growing between them. Outside, the first snow began to fall. The backlash arrived like winter itself, sudden, cold, and unforgiving. It started with Jonathan's business partners at their weekly meeting. Harrison Webb leaned back in his leather chair, cigar smoke curling upward. Jonathan, we need to discuss this school situation. What situation? Jonathan knew exactly what situation. Your son's mixing with street children. It reflects poorly on our firm. Clients are asking questions. Questions about what about your judgment. Webb tapped ash into a crystal tray. If you make questionable decisions about your children's education, what other questionable decisions might you make about investments? The room murmured agreement. Jonathan felt pressure building from all sides. At the country club, society wives refused to acknowledge his presence. Their daughters declined William's invitation to a holiday party with transparent excuses. The boys' applications to advanced academies were quietly rejected. The real blow came at a Chamber of Commerce dinner. Judge Morrison, respected pillar of the community, stood during the open comment period. Jonathan Pierce is conducting a dangerous social experiment, Morrison announced. Mixing classes threatens the natural order. If street children get ideas above their station, who will sweep our chimneys? Who will sell flowers at market? Heads nodded throughout the room. Someone muttered about misguided charity. Jonathan stood slowly. Education doesn't threaten order. Ignorance does. Noble words, Morrison replied. But your sons are being contaminated by proximity to poverty. You're ruining their futures for your own vanity. Jonathan had no response that wouldn't sound defensive. The consequences spread like disease. Katie's landlord visited her boarding room with an eviction notice. My wife won't have you under our roof. You're corrupting the Pierce boys, teaching them to disrespect their betters. I teach them to read and calculate, Katie said calmly. You teach them rebellion. You have 1 week. Several of Katie's students stopped attending. Their parents received warnings from employers: send your children to that school and lose your position. Economic survival won over education every time. May appeared at Katie's door one evening, crying. My pa says I can't come back. His boss said he'd fire him if I keep attending. Katie held the girl while she sobbed. Inside, Katie's own fear grew. She'd done this before, built something good, watched it destroyed by people who feared change. At the schoolhouse, desks sat empty. The remaining students huddled together, uncertain and scared. Jonathan watched attendance dwindle, business deals fall through, invitations cease. His sons wanted to continue, which surprised him. But at what cost? His late wife's parents wrote a scathing letter demanding he end this madness before, completely ruining their grandsons. The pressure mounted daily. Every interaction, every business dealing, every social engagement became a battlefield. One night, Jonathan stood at his study window watching snow fall on the schoolhouse. The building that had seemed so hopeful now looked isolated, besieged. Katie crossed the grounds toward it, a lone figure in the darkness. He'd done this. He'd convinced her to accept his resources, then exposed her to consequences she couldn't afford. The weight of that realization pressed down like winter itself. Jonathan paced his study at midnight. Ledgers open across his desk. Numbers told a brutal story: deals canceled, partnerships dissolved, contracts not renewed. The school was costing more than money. It was costing everything. His late wife's parents had written again, threatening legal action for custody of Theodore and William. You're unfit, they claimed, sacrificing your son's futures for delusional idealism. Maybe they were right. Jonathan poured whiskey he didn't drink, stared at columns of loss he couldn't justify. Perhaps compromise was necessary. Separate classes? Phase out the street children gradually? Admit this was naive fantasy. A soft knock interrupted his spiral. Katie stood at the study door, books in her arms. I came to return these. I didn't mean to disturb you. It's fine, I couldn't sleep anyway. She set the books down, then saw the ledgers, the letters, the haunted look on his face. You're thinking of ending it. Not a question. A statement. Jonathan couldn't meet her eyes. I'm thinking of protecting my sons and your students' families. This is hurting everyone. I thought you were building something that mattered. Katie's voice was quiet, but cut like a blade. I didn't realize you were just playing at principles until the cost got real. That's not fair. Isn't it? Katie stepped closer. You convinced me to accept your help. You promised to see this through. Now when it's hard, you're looking for exits. People are losing jobs. My sons' futures are being destroyed. Your sons are learning the only lesson worth teaching. And Katie's fierce intensity filled the room. Do you want to know what Theodore did yesterday? Jonathan said nothing. He spent an hour helping May understand long division. Patient, kind, never once making her feel stupid. Then he walked her home because snow was falling and she had no coat. Katie's eyes blazed. And William. He told his former friends that Charlie had more courage in one finger than they had, collectively, defended him so fiercely they actually backed down. They're becoming pariahs. They're becoming men. Katie's voice softened. Real men who understand that character matters more than position. Men who will use whatever wealth you leave them to do actual good in the world. Isn't that worth something? Jonathan sank into his chair. What if I'm ruining them? What if I'm wrong? Katie knelt beside him, her hand on his. You want to know what your wife would think? He'd never mentioned his late wife. How did Katie know I've seen her portrait in the hallway? The way you look at it. Katie squeezed his hand. I think she'd be proud. I think she'd say you finally remembered who you wanted to be. Tears burned Jonathan's eyes. This is so much harder than I expected. All worthwhile things are. Katie stood. The question isn't whether it's hard. The question is whether you're brave enough to be the man this moment requires. She walked to the door, then paused. Your sons already made the harder choice. They chose principle when it cost them friends and status. Will you be brave enough to choose it too? After she left. Jonathan sat in silence. The ledgers remained open. The losses still real. But he thought of Theodore patiently teaching May, William defending Charlie, his sons becoming something more than heirs to wealth. He thought of Katie's question at the warehouse, the one that started everything help or judge. He'd spent his life judging, building distance, protecting position. Maybe it was time to help instead. Jonathan stood, walked to the window. Snow fell on the schoolhouse where lamplight still glowed. Katie working late, refusing to abandon her mission. He made his decision. We'll face them together. He whispered to the darkness. All of us. Jonathan sent invitations throughout town, a demonstration at the schoolhouse. All welcome to attend. Katie protested the spectacle, but he insisted. Let them see what education really means, he said. The day arrived cold and clear. By 9 o'clock, the schoolhouse overflowed with spectators. Business leaders, society wives, skeptics and allies crowded together. Judge Morrison sat in front, arms crossed, expression severe. Theodore and William stood with their classmates, nervous but determined. The remaining students, only 8 now, held themselves with quiet dignity. Katie addressed the crowd. Thank you for coming. Our students have prepared demonstrations of what they've learned. We ask only that you listen with open hearts. May stepped forward first. Her hands trembled as she unrolled a hand-drawn map showing every street in their neighborhood. Small notes marked each location. "This is where we live," she began, voice gaining strength. "Every mark shows someone's story. Here's Mrs. Chen, she came from China in 1885. Here's the Murphy family, they fled famine in Ireland. Here's Charlie's family, they've been here 3 generations, but still work dangerous jobs." She pointed to elegant neighborhoods on the map's edge. "Here's where some of you live. We learned geography by mapping our whole world, not just the parts that look pretty." Next came arithmetic. Charlie and William presented together a detailed budget for helping Mrs. O'Brien, a widow, repair her leaking roof. "Materials cost $17. William explained. "Labor adds 12 more if we hire carpenters. But if we help ourselves under Mr. Hendricks's supervision," he nodded to a local carpenter, "we can do it for $19 total. We calculated," Charlie added. "If everyone contributes 50 cents, we can help her before winter gets worse." Several women in the audience dabbed at tears. Theodore presented an essay on medicinal plants. "I used to think poverty meant having nothing. May taught me that poor people have knowledge rich people buy from doctors. She knows 20 plants that heal. I knew none. Who's really ignorant?" The students shared more spelling achievements, mathematical solutions, collaborative projects blending book learning with practical wisdom. Finally, May read her essay. Her voice carried clear and strong across the crowded room. "Before this school, I thought education was for other people, rich people, people who mattered." She paused, meeting eyes throughout the crowd. "Miss Katie taught me it was for me, that I mattered too." Theodore helped me understand long division. I helped him understand hunger. We both learned. Her next words fell into profound silence. Judge Morrison asked who will sweep chimneys if poor children get educated. I'll tell you who: people who choose it as skilled work and get paid fairly, not children who have no other option, because no one thought they deserved to learn. Theodore stepped forward. "I used to think I was fortunate because my father had money. Now I know I'm fortunate because Miss Katie showed me gratitude. She showed me that the girl beside me, who sells flowers at market, is braver and smarter than I ever was. That's what I learned here, not just arithmetic, humanity." Judge Morrison's face remained stern, but others softened visibly. Several parents whispered to each other, reconsidering their judgments. A woman in the back raised her hand. "Miss Katie, do you have room for more students?" Katie blinked, surprised. Yes. Always. I'd like my daughter to attend, if you'll have her." Another parent stood. "And my son." The crowd stirred not universal acceptance, but something shifting, cracks appearing in rigid certainty. Jonathan watched from the side, seeing his experiment validated, not through his arguments, but through children's transformation, through Theodore's patience, William's courage, through every small gesture of growth. Katie caught his eye across the room. Her expression held pride mixed with exhaustion, hope threaded with lingering fear. They'd won something here, not everything, not everyone, but enough. Judge Morrison departed without comment, face dark with disapproval. But others lingered, asking questions, expressing interest, seeing possibilities they'd refused before. As the crowd dispersed, Jonathan found Katie outside, breathing cold air like medicine. "You did well," he said quietly. "They did well." Katie gestured toward the students helping clean the schoolhouse. "They proved what I always knew: education transcends class when humanity connects first." Jonathan stood beside her, watching Theodore laugh with May about something, watching William and Charlie plan their roof repair project. "I learned something too," he admitted. "What's that? That wealth without purpose is poverty of the soul." Katie smiled. "Took you long enough?" They stood together in winter sunlight, Watching something fragile but real taking root, spring arrived slowly, testing everyone's patience, but it arrived nonetheless. The schoolhouse expanded. 6 new students joined children whose parents valued education over social judgment. Katie hired an assistant teacher, a young woman who'd heard about the experiment and wanted to help. Theodore and William returned to advanced studies at a different academy, one that valued character over pedigree. But twice weekly, they returned to tutor younger students, carrying Katie's philosophy forward. Jonathan's business recovered gradually. Some relationships remained fractured, probably permanently, but new partnerships formed with men who respected principle over protocol. Different clients, different opportunities, better ones. Katie accepted a permanent position not just as teacher, but as part of Jonathan's household. Not as servant or employee, but as partner in raising his sons and educating a community. They never discussed the feelings that had grown between them during midnight conversations. Some things didn't need naming yet. They had time. The abandoned warehouse across town stood empty again. Katie visited it once more, standing where she'd first taught children by lamplight. It had served its purpose, showing a rich man that poverty wasn't lack of money, but lack of compassion. Now her students learned in brightness, with resources matching their hunger for knowledge. One warm May afternoon, Jonathan stood in the schoolhouse doorway, watching Katie teach. Theodore helped May with geometry at the back table. William and Charlie planned their future. They wanted to build schools in frontier towns. Bringing education west, the other students worked in cooperative groups, solving problems together, teaching each other, bridging worlds that society insisted must stay separate. Katie noticed Jonathan watching. She smiled, continuing her lesson without pause. He'd built an empire of rail lines and property. He'd amassed wealth beyond most men's dreams. But standing here, watching this, he finally understood what he'd been missing. Purpose, connection, legacy that mattered. His sons would inherit money, certainly. But more importantly, they'd inherit character. The understanding that privilege obligated service, that walls between hearts served no one, that the measure of a man wasn't his distance from those below, but his willingness to see there was no below, just humanity. In all its struggle and beauty, Katie dismissed class as afternoon light slanted golden through windows. Students filed out, calling goodbyes, making plans for tomorrow. Theodore and May left together, discussing a botany project. William and Charlie argued cheerfully about lumber costs for their next repair project. Katie began straightening desks. Jonathan moved to help her. "You don't need to." "I know." He picked up scattered slates. "I want to." They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that grows between people who understand each other without needing constant words. "Do you remember the first time you came to the warehouse?" Katie asked. "How could I forget you asked if I'd come to help or judge? You didn't answer then." "I know." Jonathan set the last desk straight. "I can answer now, though." "Oh." He met her eyes directly. "I came to judge. I left wanting to help. You taught me the difference." Katie's smile held warmth that rivaled the spring sunshine. "I taught you nothing. You taught yourself." "No." Jonathan shook his head. "You taught me everything that matters. You showed me that education isn't about subjects or curriculum. It's about seeing people. Really seeing them. And what do you see now?" "I see children learning to count change and count their own worth. I see my sons becoming men I'm proud of. I see a community slowly, stubbornly learning to build bridges instead of walls." He paused, then added quietly, "I see a woman who owns nothing but changed everything." Katie blushed slightly. "I just teach children to read." "You teach them that they matter. That education is theirs by right, not privilege. That's worth more than every rail line I've built." They stood in the empty schoolhouse, spring light making everything soft and possible. Outside, Theodore called back, "Father, Miss Katie, we're going to help plant Mrs. Chen's garden. Want to come?" Jonathan looked at Katie. She nodded. We'll be right there, he called as they walked toward the door. Katie paused. Thank you. For what? For being brave enough to become the man this moment required? Jonathan smiled. Thank you for showing me what that looked like. They stepped into spring sunshine together. The street children and railroad magnate's sons worked side by side, planting seeds in Mrs. Chen's garden, laughing, arguing, learning from each other. The abandoned warehouse stood empty across town, its purpose complete. But here, in this schoolhouse on a rich man's estate, something better had taken root. Not just education. Community, family built from choice rather than blood. Jonathan watched Theodore explain plant spacing to May, while William and Charlie carried water buckets. Together, his sons learning that the best inheritance wasn't wealth but character. The best legacy wasn't property but compassion. Katie stood beside him, her hand finding his naturally. What education truly meant, Jonathan said quietly, wasn't the subjects taught. It was the humanity discovered in teaching and learning together. Yes, Katie agreed. Exactly that. And in the spring afternoon, surrounded by children who'd learned to see past class and circumstance to simple human worth, they both finally understood what they'd built. Not a school, a home, not a program, a family, not an experiment. A truth so simple they'd both needed to learn it, that every person matters, that education belongs to everyone, that the walls we build between hearts serve no one, and that love, whether for learning, for children, or for each other, always finds its way home.